the Go Hunt Life Show, hosted by Todd Nevins.
This is Todd Nevins, and I interview people that had seemingly normal lives and careers going, but they pulled the ripcord to epically reinvent themselves in order to pursue a life full of purpose and passion. This episode is sponsored by PrintDirtCheap.com. Jeff Chrisman, the founder of Print Dirt Cheap, and the crew there are rock stars when it comes to delivering top-quality printing at a cheap price. If you've met me in the last 3 years and I handed you a business card, it was printed by Print Dirt Cheap. They're my online digital printing company for everything. They do banners, company letterhead, a ton of direct mail pieces, funky decals, even menus for restaurants. Over 30 categories of printing products, and yes, business cards. And they do it fast, and they do it cheap. Jeff has streamlined every little aspect of the business to provide the perfect user experience, delivering the best product in the industry. I have personally been to the offices, and I have seen it firsthand. But see for yourself. Go to PrintDirtCheap.com and use promo code GoHuntLife and get $10 off of your order. Or if you want to get a sample of their work, click on Sample Pack, and they'll mail you one out for free. Go to PrintDirtCheap.com, use promo code GoHuntLife for $10 off of your next print job. This episode is also sponsored by one of my companies, Click Placement. We are a pay-per-click marketing agency specializing in PPC badassery. We have literally helped hundreds of companies over the last decade drive engagement through paid search advertising using Google AdWords and Bing Ads, LinkedIn, and of course, Facebook. We work with startups, established businesses, and nonprofits to customize campaigns to drive sales or leads, build brand awareness, sell products, or generate mobile app downloads. Hit us up at clickplacement.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn to start a conversation.
We currently live in about 1,700 square feet. We are a family of 3 with 2 dogs. And we think this is way too much space. And so the original idea was to move into something smaller. Then the idea came about of actually moving into something smaller and mobile. So I reached out to a friend of mine that pursued a similar path with his family several years ago. And when I asked him how he secured the vehicle, the RV and the truck and those kinds of things, he said, ours is available for purchase. They were taking it off the road, putting it in storage. And I said, hey, this sounds like a great match. So what we're doing, we're selling almost everything we own and moving into a recreational vehicle, a fifth wheel, and we're going to drive until we're done.
That is Michael Sitarzewski, and he has lived his life around the motto of doing things you can't. He's built a bunch of different tech companies, and he's rallied the startup community in Dallas around helping one another. So the terms innovator, risk taker, community builder, and entrepreneur all describe him perfectly. Another thing is that Michael and his wife Heather have embraced frugal living and the minimalistic lifestyle. As an example, he's lived in Dallas, Texas for the last year and a half without a car. And they also made it their mission to make and eat meals that cost less than $2 per person. But I caught up to him as they were pulling the ripcord on the lives that they had created there in Dallas to embark on the unknown on the road. They have just launched Epic Mini Life, which means they are selling everything that they own down to a pickup truck and an RV and heading out of Dallas to travel the U.S. with their 12-year-old daughter and their 2 dogs. And we get into the how and the why and what they've done right and what hasn't gone so right in this process. They're a little bit delayed on leaving. Before we get to our conversation, if you'd like to support the Go Hunt Life podcast, please go to patreon.com/Go Hunt Life. And for little as $1 an episode, you can support the podcast. And I greatly appreciate your help and donations. Now, my conversation with Michael, where I ask him and he answers, how do you live a life doing things you can't? Michael Sitarzewski, thank you for joining me today on Go Hunt Life.
My pleasure.
What city are you in? And if for you to walk out the front door, describe what you would see.
Dallas, Texas, in a neighborhood called the Cedars. If I walk out my front door, I see a 4-lane road with semis and buses and lots of pedestrian traffic right in the heart of the city. We're a mile south of downtown.
How old are you? Are you married, and do you have kids?
I am 48 years old. I am married. I do have a child, 12-year-old daughter, and we have been together, my wife and I, for 23 years.
Congratulations. What is your profession and primary ways that you earn a living right now?
what is my profession? This is an interesting topic. Generally, when somebody asks that question, I ask, which part of Michael are we talking about? I am by trade a self-taught programmer and developer. I write code for a living. I've created and founded many companies over the last 25 years or so, and that is my skill set, is creating companies and writing software.
When was the last time that you had a real job and you were an employee at a company that you didn't create?
Roughly 1994, I took a part-time job as a part of another consulting gig. So 1994, 23 years.
And what was your first company that you started?
It was a company called Advanced Image Setting, and the idea was that it was desktop publishing. Back in the day, this was probably 89 or so,
okay.
And I taught myself how to do business cards and brochures and these kinds of things using a Mac computer.
Interesting. All right. So you're currently, one of the things that you're doing now is that you're the CEO of a company called Epic Playground, and your flagship product, man, I don't know of anybody that says, I love direct mail and I love receiving direct mail, but the product Inbound Geo has turned direct mail upside down. Explain the product.
You described it perfectly. It does turn direct mail upside down. Instead of purchasing a list of 5,000 or so of your best guesses for new customers, what Inbound Geo does is ask each user of your website for their location, and if it matches a set of criteria, then Inbound Geo will sell you that address for $1, the user's home address.
Wow.
And so instead of guessing that they're going to come to your website, we already know they've been on your website. We know what they looked at. We know what the frequency is and those kinds of things. And so when you send them a direct mail piece, it's far more relevant and serendipitous.
So it says on the website that you help luxury brands reach potential customers. Why just luxury brands? It seems like this is wide open and untapped for more or less any type of company out there.
Because our costs are a little bit more expensive than traditional direct mail, we wanted to find specific customers that wouldn't balk at the pricing structure and would also find the value appropriate to the cost. So for us to send a postcard on your behalf at the end of a day is $3. And if you know the printing business, it costs less than 50 cents to get something in the mail and out the door. But I think the value that we provide there is the targeting and the very specific matching of the potential customer to your product. And so we think it's more of a luxury, more of a higher end product than traditional direct mail. Are
we talking? Jewelry stores or car dealerships? What would be the typical bullseye type of a customer?
You mentioned two of our best customers. In fact, I've got another one coming on June 1st, which is a jeweler. They are the price they're paying through one of my ad agency customers is the same as they're paying per click for Google pay-per-click, which is $6 per postcard. So we have everything all over the board, from the jewelry companies, like you mentioned. I've got one of the nation's largest, to rental companies, to car dealers. I've got a company that I ran into here in Dallas that controls 2,000 auto dealer websites. They are ecstatic about this product. So it really is anything that has more or less a long-term customer value of worth, something maybe over $2,500 per customer.
Okay.
And then anything that's a considered purchase, we think is a great match.
Got it. And you're the CEO. Are you going to continue on as CEO, which is certainly leading us into the next phase of our conversation? But do you intend on staying as the CEO?
I do, absolutely. And the little secret about Inbound Geo is it is an evolution of Epic Playground, and the original product was called Media Gauge. I had at one point 9 people on the team. I had 2 co-founders, and that was a real-time audio and video analytics product. And the reality was when we moved back here to Dallas that product wasn't going to make it long-term. Of course, today, knowing what we know, it could probably do well, but the point is just myself, a whole bunch of servers on DigitalOcean, and I've done a reasonable job of curating a clientele that is ad agencies and digital agencies, and they are the ones selling it on my behalf.
Okay.
So
all right.
I write code, they handle the customer interactions, and I can do that from anywhere on the globe.
leveraging their relationships already. Okay, so now let's jump into it. You are right in the middle of pulling a ripcord on your personal lives, professional lives, I guess a little bit, and launching what is called Epic Mini Life, which is a smaller, lighter, intentional, tech-powered life. What does that mean, and what are you about to embark on?
What does that mean? We currently live in about 1,700 square feet. We are a family of 3 with 2 dogs, and we think this is way too much space. And so the original idea was to move into something smaller. Then the idea came about of actually moving into something smaller and mobile. And so I reached out to a friend of mine that pursued a similar path with his family several years ago. And when I asked him how he secured the vehicle, the RV, and the truck, and those kinds of things, he said, ours is available for purchase. So they just had a baby. They were taking it off the road, putting it in storage. And I said, hey, this sounds like a great match. So what we're doing, to answer the question directly, is we're selling almost everything we own and moving into a recreational vehicle, a 5th wheel, and we're going to drive until we're done.
All right. So when did you start thinking about this? It looks like you've just put some blog posts up earlier this year in January and February. But when did this start transitioning from idea to reality? We are going to do this.
Probably early last fall. My wife and I began to discuss this. The house that we were in before was 3,400 square feet. So we moved from 3,400 down here to 1,700, and then she sort of felt empowered by that reduction of stuff and really didn't stop after that. So she would sell things on Craigslist or what have you. And then we started watching some YouTube videos and seeing other people that were taking this plunge. She got into minimalism, really trying to figure out how to reduce her footprint from an ecological standpoint as well. And so it was kind of a natural evolution. And what we ended up doing was taking a beta test trip last fall to Orlando. And what I mean by that is my wife, daughter, and I took a backpack each, 7 days worth of clothing, our electronics, and our toiletries. And that was all we took in the backpack. We went to Orlando and survived a week. Imagine that, with only the things on our back. And that was kind of the trigger point, was her realizing that she didn't miss a single thing that was back at home other than our dogs.
It seems like there's a number of different converging motivators from embracing what you just said, the minimalistic mentality, minimalistic lifestyle, but then also you're going to add in the nomadic life where you can be anywhere, and then having low overhead, meaning less stress. Like, which one do you think, if you were to prioritize which factor makes the most impact to your decision, which would that be? Or is it something that I didn't mention?
Wow, that is it's a hard question to answer. In order to answer that kind of properly, you have to understand where I was before we made this decision to pull back and scale back.
Okay.
I had Epic Playground, which is the Inbound Geo product. I was running Launch DFW, which is a Dallas-based startup culture magazine product. I was the president of the Cedars Neighborhood Association, which is our neighborhood here. I'd been doing that for 2 years. I had a role in running, actually I started Dallas Startup Week in 2015 and 16. I chose not to do it again in 17 for the obvious reasons. And I just had so many things going on. I was involved in the homeless kind of care discussion in Dallas and carrying on all of these sorts of extracurricular activities and not really focusing on doing one of them well. And so that was part of it as well, is focusing on scaling back the reach of what Michael was doing to just one thing, and that's Inbound Geo and my family. So releasing all of those other, I don't want to say points of stress, but just I didn't have to deal with as much, minimizing the amount of things or the number of things in my head that I had to worry about or think about. That was probably the number one.
There's a line in your LinkedIn profile that says that you organized well over 100 community events in the last year, 2 events a week. I have a hard time going to 2 events a week. I can't imagine organizing them. But how have you been able to let go of the identity of you're the startup guy, you're the community builder guy there in Dallas. How have you been able to let go of that identity?
This is actually not a trick question. When I came back from Boulder, I moved back from Boulder to Dallas. One of the things that I really wanted to focus on was building a startup community here. I moved here in 1989, built a ton of internet things through the 90s, and didn't have anything like a community that I found in Boulder after 2006. And the one thing that I really appreciated about the Boulder ecosystem is there was no head. It was a headless kind of community, and I think that was a terrific design. And so when I set foot here in Dallas, that was the ultimate goal, was to reach out to all of the kind of incumbent or current community members and leaders and say, look, in order for this thing to work long term, there can't be a single point of failure. There can't be one organization that if it fails, the entire community is in question. And so what that means is the community became the center of the community. The people in it and running it and operating it were the community, no single organization. And Austin is, arguably not the same way, but that's okay. The long story there is me pulling out of Dallas is kind of a natural evolution of the way we built the community here.
Okay.
It's like it's running itself. Ignite is running itself. Dallas New Tech is running itself. The 8 open coffee clubs around the city are still running just fine without me. It's great.
How are you personally then with the fact that you're not going to have that at your fingertips, that moment where, I'm going to go jump into that coffee event tomorrow morning? You won't physically be there to jump into those events. What are your thoughts on that?
I will still be in the Slack. So I'll still be around.
Slack.
It's also, to be clear, it's not like I'm disconnecting from the world, right? When I say off grid in terms of this next phase, it simply means I'm not going to be hardwired into the physical grid, right? The power and electricity and those kinds of things.
Okay.
But I'll still be very connected from a technological standpoint, probably more than I've ever been, as it'll be that much more important.
Some of the things that in your bio, and I had lived in Dallas for a long time. One of the things that you did and accomplished in Dallas, which this might be one of your biggest accomplishments, you went carless for a year.
Still.
How? How do you get from downtown to Frisco if you need to get there? What's your routine to do that stuff?
So it's funny that you chose that particular scenario, right? The city of Frisco has no desire whatsoever to be a part of the Dallas area rapid transit system. It probably will never happen. But you've also assumed that I actually have a need to get to Frisco. So that's part of the folly, right?
Right.
Part of the design of the way we live our lives is very intentional. And that's kind of you can see how we're getting where we're going here. Mm-hmm. When we lived in Flower Mound, I used to drive 20 minutes to a train station and then another 40 minutes into downtown Dallas. So that was an hour each direction.
Yeah.
We decided that a 2-hour-a-day commute was not really worth the expense of living in Flower Mound and having a 3,400 square foot house with the big yard and the great schools and all that. As soon as we pulled my daughter out of school altogether, the house in Flower Mound became excessive, and therefore we chose to move closer to the city's core where I was spending all of my time anyway. And so when we chose the place we're living now, we chose it specifically because it's a great neighborhood, obviously, but there are 3 bus lines and 2 trains that are walkable from my front door, and the bus goes right up my street, so I don't have to walk very far at all. And it's a mile away, so I can walk. It's 20 minutes. I can ride a bike. It's about 6. And the need for a car just kind of went out the window.
That is a rarity in Dallas. My gosh.
It's absolutely not. You would be surprised at the number of people that are doing exactly what I'm doing. In fact, a lot of our neighbors don't drive. They have cars, but they sit in the garage and collect dust. I shouldn't say most, but a lot of the people that I know in the startup community downtown, they live, work, and play downtown. And when they need to get somewhere that they can't, they'll Uber or Lyft or what have you. And the city of Dallas has been magnificent at accepting and welcoming those types of technologies.
How bikeable is it down there? I mean, do you feel safe on the roads on a bicycle?
Depends on the road.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that it's, boulder quality down here, but I think a lot of the fear about riding bicycles on the streets has more to do with storytelling and legacy than it does with actual reality. I ride them all the time, and I've never been honked at once, but that might be because I'm not doing anything that would cause somebody to honk at me, right?
Exactly.
So, I don't know.
Along the same lines of embracing frugal living, I'm going to mess up the numbers here, but you've been trying to eat for less than $2 per person. Help me out with that. What have you been aiming at as far as like how you're spending your money on food and what you're consuming? This
was a part of an earlier story when Heather and I were living in Colorado. We paid off all of our consumer debt. When we got our mortgage, I promise you I'll get there. When we got our mortgage, it was 14% of our take-home income. And so we've always kind of monkeyed around with finances and doing things a little bit differently. And we came up with this idea one day is like, how much would it cost us to cook at home, which we already know is significantly less expensive than eating out. But if we only made purchases in our meal planning from the weekly circulars, you get those things in the mail and it's like ground beef is on sale for 49 cents a pound or whatever it might be, right? What if you did all of your meal planning out of those circulars? And that's where we arrived at Eat Frugally. That's the hashtag we use for that particular adventure. And so what we've been able to do is most all of our meals that we cook at home are under $2.50. And then sometimes we can get it under $1 depending on what it is.
Amazing. All right. So the Minimalist documentary is skyrocketing right now. Their book, their tour, like all of it. I mean, that's a movement that they are helping people with the tiny homes. Are they a motivating factor or are there other people or a person that's inspired you along the way?
I think it's more validation than it is necessarily inspiration. But you mentioned the rise of that movie and kind of the fall of consumerism. Just look at the number of malls and big box retailers that are failing all over the place. And it really is kind of a magnificent thing. As far as inspiration goes, I love to see people doing things that are different. I didn't go to college. I quit high school. My daughter's not in school. And we kind of think a little bit differently and celebrate people that are willing to take a huge risk and just go do something fun.
So you mentioned your daughter. You're going to get in a Ford F. What do you got? 250, 350?
F350, right?
F350 and a travel trailer that's 350 square feet. Right. And your daughter is 12 years old. What does she think of this?
She was reluctant at first, as you would be, with something that's unknown. But we do when we travel. We travel with a very light footprint. She has been fortunate to have a couple of friends here in the neighborhood and have made a couple of friends up in Flower Mound, in Colorado and all over the place. And, the reality of the matter is that being a kid today is a very different thing than it was when I was a kid. I'm 48 years old. And when I would move from city to city, I would lose touch with those friends because the only way to keep in touch with them was handwriting or a long distance phone call. And nobody wanted to do that. But today, she keeps in touch with her friends in Flower Mound, like she's in Flower Mound.
Sure.
And so she spends a lot of time gaming online. She plays Roblox and Minecraft online and these things. And most of her friends, frankly, aren't even in this country. So as soon as she kind of realized that, and it didn't matter necessarily where she was, she could still keep in touch with the same friends. Then she was a lot more open to it. I think the biggest struggle for her is going to be that she won't have unlimited YouTube. She spends an inordinate amount of time on YouTube learning and watching and kind of experiencing life with YouTube as well. And once we hit the road, it's going to be mostly mobile internet. So a change.
So you had described that you had pulled her out of traditional school previously, and I saw at one point that she's unschooled. What does that mean?
What that means is our role as parents become more instructional on how to learn and less about what to learn. Traditional school tells you have to learn math and science and history and all these things. Our version of school, the unschool, leaves it up to the child to determine what they're interested in. And what we found is that when she chooses something to learn, she will binge on that subject for days. And you can't find that in a traditional public school. Or it's harder to find that, right?
Sure. Definitely. Yeah. You also mentioned you've got 2 dogs along for the ride. So it's a family of 5 traipsing across in the pickup truck and all sleeping in the RV. How big are the dogs, and what types of precautions have you added to your plan with them?
Well, so a couple of ways to answer this question. One is we don't plan on driving more than 4 hours a day.
Okay.
So we're not going to spend a lot of time in the truck itself. It is a crew cab, so there's room. And then, the dogs themselves are between 30 and 40 pounds, so they're relatively small.
Yeah.
Medium-sized dogs, I guess. They don't take up a lot of square footage. They sit at the table with us, so that probably won't change. We will have a full-size couch and a couple of chairs, so I don't think space is going to be a problem. The one thing we have had to work on is since we moved into the place we have grass in our backyard. We're in a townhouse, and like I said, we're a mile south of downtown. And so it's very easy to just open the back door and let the dogs out in the yard. And part of my daughter's duties is to pick up the poop every now and then, and actually every morning. And so that hasn't been a big deal. But what we haven't been doing religiously is walking them. And so we've gotten more in the habit of doing that because it's going to be required once we're in the RV.
Are you planning on staying at national parks or state parks or Walmart parking lots, all the above? Like, where do you think you're going to sleep?
All of the above. Absolutely all of the above. There's a great pass that you can get for national parks. It's $80 a year. There is an app called All Stays that kind of points out once you choose a location that you want to stay in, that'll show you, like you said, the Walmarts, the Cracker Barrels, the Pilots, actually more the Flying J's, the national parks, the state parks, city parks. These are all valid places to stay.
All right. So you mentioned that your daughter is going to be restricted as far as her YouTube usage. I mean, you are as well, although you're going to be you're going to need to stay digitally connected. What type of changes have you made in your career or professional life, and then where's the Wi-Fi come from?
Luckily, I don't have to change much at all from a professional perspective. Like I mentioned earlier, I have done a fairly decent job of finding customers that have customers. So that's kind of a scalable process there. From a Wi-Fi perspective, I don't spend a ton of time necessarily on Wi-Fi itself. Most of the stuff that I do is locally generated, so code, for example, and then I just need to commit code and commit it to production. So that doesn't require a lot of bandwidth.
Okay.
As far as the show and the Epic Mini Life YouTube channel and those kinds of things, of course, those will have to wait until we have good solid bandwidth one way or another. And fortunately for us, McDonald's and Starbucks and some of the other major national chains have great Wi-Fi these days. So that shouldn't be an issue either.
So you mentioned your YouTube channel. It looks like you've been a community builder for your entire life. What are your plans to build a community around your story to then inspire others to follow a similar path or a path that they're inspired by?
What's the funny way to answer that question is I went to, do you know Launchpad by Blackstone? It's at University of Texas. They have kind of an accelerator.
Yes.
I went up to their Dallas UTD launch event, and this is probably last week or so, maybe 2 weeks ago. And every single person that I shook hands with, they were congratulatory on the move and telling me how much they wish they could do that and change their lives, and maybe in a couple of years once the kids leave, and all these different things. And I think that was a recognition that it's already started to happen.
Yeah. That
people are following along and kind of living vicariously through the lives of Heather and Zion and I. And so it's already started to happen. In fact, what's really cool about this is in learning more about this kind of idea of being mobile like this, we found other people like you found, the expat community. We found, very similar people out on the road already, full-timers, as they're called in air quotes, and just traveling, and they've already created a community. We just have to go join it.
Okay, so it's allstays.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have on your Facebook page a video on Casey Neistat, that's titled "Do Things You Can't," and that you say in the post that you recently watched that. Describe what that video means to you, and how does that fit into what you're doing right now?
Well, I kind of alluded to it earlier, right? I didn't go to college. I've never taken a college course in my life, and statistically, I'm not supposed to be, of too much value to society at this point. So that's kind of a proof in itself, is do something that you can't. And what I can't do is, according to stats, is create a business or sell a business or, be responsible for my own life if I didn't go to college. And taking my child out of school is something we can't do. You can't do that. She's not going to have a future. Those kinds of things are what we look for. And finding Casey's video is just, again, validation that we're doing things correctly as a family. As soon as somebody says you're crazy, that means we're on target.
Perfect. You sent out your first tweet on Twitter at Epic Minilife on March 18th, 2017 at 12:53 p.m. And you said,
nice.
We're new here and we're embarking on an epic minimal lifestyle. It starts on 5/1/17. Follow the adventure. We're a few weeks into May and you're still in Dallas. So what is the situation now, and how soon are you pulling out of town?
So we made an error. We made a major error, and I'll tell you what that was. Is we decided to have an estate sale. In fact, we had 2 estate sales here in Dallas, and what that means is if you've ever been through one of these things, actually you have, how did you sell all of your stuff? Let's throw this back at you. When you guys decided to sell everything.
Having an estate sale at our house was an absolute disaster.
Right?
It didn't work. They didn't sell anything. And it was the most stressful aspect of us liquidating our lives, was the lack of that estate sale company doing what they said they were going to do. It was terrible.
So how did you end up getting rid of all of your stuff?
Craigslist and giving it away, donating it, and garage sale after garage sale, just liquidation.
So there's your answer.
Okay.
Here's how this cookie crumbles. Our idealistic kind of view of how this was going to happen is we made the decision to do it. We contacted a realtor. The realtor said, we need to take some pictures. We need to get the thing listed and so on and so forth. And we said, okay. But we're going to have an estate sale. In fact, we're going to have 2 weekends of estate sales. Whatever's left, we'll stage the house with. We'll take the pictures, get it listed, and sell it. And that, of course, is the ideal scenario. Mm-hmm. What ended up happening is we had 2 weekends of estate sales, and then we had a third weekend planned because nothing sold, mostly because we didn't promote it very well. Then the reality of the matter is that there's too much stuff to have photos taken of the house, so we haven't put it on the market yet. Then if we do get an offer, which we had one, and we go into an appraisal process, then that appraisal, the appraiser comes into the house and takes a look at it in its current state, which it looks like a disaster area in here because all of our belongings are out in display, so we can have these estate sales. Long story short, we underestimated how long it would take to get rid of all of the things that we own. Heather has come to the point now where she's realizing that, even though a stack of books might have a value to her, it doesn't necessarily have a value to someone else. And the real value might just be in it not being in her possession anymore. And so we've come to that conclusion as well. We're starting to give away a ton of stuff. And there's some collectibles and things we won't give away. But that's really the holdup, is how soon can we get all of our things out of this house to get it cleaned up, to get it in show order, to get the pictures taken, to put it on the market and get out of here. The other folly was the idea of having to wait for the house to sell in order to be able to leave on the trip. And just recently, I've taken I did a deal with Compass Bank, and I've got us in a situation where we can get the RV and the truck before we actually sell the house, and then we'll use the proceeds to pay for that afterwards instead of waiting until it sells. Make sense? Yeah, because we don't have a mortgage.
Okay,
right?
So it's paid off.
Yeah, the house is paid off, so there's not necessarily urgency. Once we have the RV and the truck, there's not necessarily any urgency, so we can take our time with that.
Yeah, estate sales just simply didn't work for me either. So if this all comes together, you get rid of your stuff, when do you hope to then be leaving Dallas?
We're actually picking up the truck on the 26th. So that's already scheduled. Yeah.
Okay.
Once then we'll bring the truck back here, we'll pack it up, and then that'll be once we get that done, that'll be the impetus to get rid of all the rest of the stuff and get everything in order. We'll be out of here. The goal, the restated goal, if you look around, is by the end of May.
By the end of May.
We should hit that, yeah.
Okay. You've certainly got income coming in from your company. You also have a Patreon page, and you can check it out at patreon.com/Epic Mini Life. You also have affiliate links on your blog. How else will you be monetizing this journey? There
are a couple of different ways. So specifically the journey, I've had 2 sponsors reach out and want to get involved with us. They've recognized that I do have that community footprint from here in Dallas, but also from Boulder. And remarkably, we're starting to gather some momentum across the country too. Like I mentioned, the community's welcomed us pretty well, and their engagement on social media has led to some interesting conversations too. But my wife she's a Disney travel planner, and she plans people's Disney trips, be it a cruise or any of the parks or what have you. And her business is actually picking up quite well as well. So between all of those different things, income, fortunately for us, shouldn't be much of an issue.
And your expenses are going to be dropping.
Well, since we don't have a house payment and we are going to have gas.
You don't have property taxes.
Right. We don't have property taxes.
But you will have fuel. That's expensive.
And so here's another reality. The reality is you think, wow, if you're driving every single day and you fill up a tank, how much does that cost? It's, $100, whatever that is.
Sure.
We don't have to drive every day.
Right.
So if we boondock for a week, we don't move for a week, that means our expenses go way down. And there's no hurry. There's no reason we have to be in any specific place. So one of the realities that we've had over the last probably 3 weeks is we don't have to move all the time. Mm-hmm. And therefore we can manage our budget that way.
So let's say you leave at the very end of May. Where are you headed first, and how far out do you have planned?
The original plan has changed pretty significantly. We are moving, or we're going to go directly to Florida.
Okay.
Heather, and I'll explain that. We're going directly to Florida, to Disney World, because the original plan had us going all over the entire country and then landing in Florida.
All right.
And as time went on, we kept adding and adding more things that we wanted to do, and Florida kept getting further and further away, where ultimately that's where Heather wants to be because she's a Disney travel planner and she hasn't been in a while. So we decided to make that the first stop, and then all of the rest of the stuff.
You plan on staying in the United States or jumping up into Canada or down into Mexico?
As we learn, we'll be in the United States, but I think as we grow a little bit more comfortable with the whole idea, we certainly plan on going into Mexico, maybe into the northwestern tip of Canada, so we can get into Alaska.
You mentioned something as we learn. What new skills have you had to learn that are completely outside of your normal area of expertise, like changing a tire on an RV in the middle of a highway? Like, what skills have you had to pick up?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we haven't had to do that yet. Yeah. But there are people that have done this before, and I think that one of the things that's helping us along this is following those people and seeing what kinds of things that they encounter and being prepared for them and watching for them and what have you. But I think that crosses, not just into RVs and those kinds of things, but it's life in general. You have the ability to find just about anybody on YouTube that's done something that you want to do, and you can find and watch their documentation on how to do it themselves.
Yep.
And so part of what led us down this path was we wanted to build a small home, not a tiny home, not on wheels, those kinds of things, but around 550 to 600 square feet. That's a small home. Mm-hmm. Well, we found a whole bunch of people that have done it. And so I've been watching how they do that, and I learned about pouring concrete foundations and plumbing and all these different things that I just can't wait to implement.
YouTube is an incredible educational website. It is unbelievable. You alluded to this earlier, like until we're going to go until we are done. Like, do you have something in mind as far as being done, or are you searching for something and when you find it, or are you looking for a different city? Like when is done?
That's also changed. The original plan was that we were going to drive for about 5 months and then ultimately land within a 2-hour radius of Disney World. And that was so that Heather could, do a VIP tour service for her customers, right? So she could go knock on the door at 8 o'clock in the morning and say, all right, let's go. You've got quite an agenda today. And that's what she wants to do. She just loves it there so much. And that was the plan. What we've realized, though, is that we may get on the road and actually end up liking this. And there's no urgency. There's no job or anything like that that's calling us to Florida necessarily. So why be in a hurry to get there?
Definitely. All right. You can follow their travels at epicmini.life and on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest at Epic Mini Life, and then also support them on patreon.com/epicminilife, and then also Michael personally at Sitarzewski on Twitter, and these will all be in the show notes. Michael, are there any other sites or anywhere else that we need to follow along on your journey?
I don't think so. I think that'll do it.
Cool.
Thank you for that.
Michael, thank you very much for joining me today.
You bet.
Don't forget to hit up the rock stars at printdirtcheap.com. Use promo code GoHuntLife for $10 off of your next print job. For fast, cheap, and high-quality online printing, it's printdirtcheap.com. Hey, Life Hunters, thank you for listening to this episode of Go Hunt Life. If you like the show and would like to support it, go to iTunes and do this. Subscribe to the show, leave a rating, and review it. It helps. And thank you. If you or someone that you know has quit their normal life to follow their dreams, I would love an introduction and maybe interview them on the show. You can find me at GoHuntLife.com and also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest at GoHuntLife. Until next time, stay weird, dare greatly, and ripcord out.